I'm joined now by someone who has worked on both of Jodie Whittaker's series of Doctor Who, but he's certainly no stranger to television and film, having worked on things like Poldark, Mission Impossible, and more recently War of the Worlds and his Dark Materials. So I would like to introduce supporting artist Lex Lamprey. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Not bad, thanks. And keeping yourself busy during all of this?
Yeah, well, I've got two children, so they don't live under the same roof as me, but I've been spending most of the day with them. So yes, it's been nice actually. Even though I'm missing work very, very much, I've gotten to spend more time with them than I normally would, and yeah, they've kept my hands full. So yeah, the days are packed, regardless of the lack of work.
So a return to set will be, if anything, a little bit quieter, I imagine then.
It depends who's on the set, I suppose. You know the characters you encounter as well as I do. So I think it probably will be quieter because I think from the sounds of the way the industry is retooling itself, it's going to be smaller teams and obviously more social distancing going forward. So I think definitely more quiet than a day with my two little people.
Well, I wanted to take you back to a time before all of this when we could happily go about on the
halcyon
sets.
Days of working on film and television.
Yes. So I suppose, how did you first come to work on Doctor Who? Would you sort of audition for it like any other job?
That's a good question. It was Doctor Who actually that led me into the whole background artist world. A friend of mine used to direct Doctor Who Confidential, amongst other productions, and I've always been interested in film and television, but always assumed it was working in it was out of my reach, as I'd never studied at a university or pursued it when I was younger. But he told me about the extras agencies and recommended that I apply to those. I had no idea back then that it could be as simple as that, just joining without dropping too many names, people like Phoenix and Mad Dog, and giving them your availability and letting them know that you're interested in working. And within, I think, weeks, certainly, of signing up with my first extras agency, I was working on a production. Stella was my first one. But specifically to your question about Doctor Who, as you say, I worked on both of Jodie Whittaker's series so far. I didn't have to audition. I was a British colonel on my first episode, and I think I'd love to say it's about my skill set and my abilities, but ultimately I think it's more or less down to whether you fit the costume or not. I tend to get military personnel quite a lot. I've been all sorts of Air Force and Naval and Army officers in various productions. I don't know if you can see it now. I seem to have some kind of militaristic look. Like I say, I get cast that way a lot. So I was cast as a British colonel for Jodie Whittaker's first season, and looking at the other officers that were working that day, I think we all had a very similar average height, average build, not too big, not too small, maybe a sort of commanding presence of a sort, I don't know. But no, I didn't have to audition. Like I say, I think 41-inch chest, 34-inch waist. I think that was probably what got me the part more than anything else. Yeah. So as a professional extra, it pays to just be roughly average. You don't want to be too big and too small because those costumes are generally normal sized.
And that the sequence that you involved with was a flashback, supposedly in Singapore, which I highly doubt you made it out of Wales for that.
You're quite right. It was Wales. It was Caerphilly Mountain, in fact. But fair play to people like yourself, locations, not so much location managers, but location scouts. I'm always amazed how they're able to keep productions within a radius of unit base and yet manage to show such a wide diversity of geography. Like I say, that was Caerphilly Mountain, which doesn't strike you particularly very well, but the patch they found it did the job. It really looked like it could have been somewhere in the Far East rather than on a mountain top in Wales. It was a lovely little location, and even though I know Caerphilly Mountain reasonably well, I hadn't been to that particular part before. So little curate's egg, a little secret garden almost. It was Caerphilly, not Singapore. Sadly, I'd happily fly to Singapore to recreate the scene if they decide to do a sequel to that episode.
So you must find yourself going to a lot of the same locations, but as different fictional places.
Um, hmm. I mean, obviously, I've been to the same studios many times, and obviously, a studio you can make look uh, like two completely different locations quite easily. I don't think I've filmed at a huge number of places more than once. I'm trying to think if there's any examples. I filmed at St Paul's Cathedral. I filmed at St Fagans. I filmed in the National Museum of Wales. I filmed in just about every National Trust and Cadw property in the southern half of Wales and England. I filmed partially in the north of Wales, in Carnarvon, and a little bit more to the west in Aberystwyth. But yeah, I think St Fagans I've done a couple of different productions in. So yeah, again, there's lots of different building types there. You can make that look like literally any century going back probably as many as 2,000 years.
I suppose one location you've used a lot is Caerphilly Castle. You must be quite a regular there.
Caerphilly Castle I did twice, 2 series of Spanish Princess. I think I'm allowed to say that. That was a lot of fun to work on. My biggest job for last year. Did quite a few weeks on that as a Westminster Guard. Again, I think I'm allowed to say that. Series 2 hasn't come out yet, but I think it's too much of a spoiler to point out that a Tudor drama has Westminster Guards in it. But I love the fact that one of the joys of the job is being able to visit, like say, National Trust and Cadw and English heritage properties. Sometimes seeing parts of those properties that the public don't normally get to see, and obviously you get to see them dressed up as they would have been centuries ago, and it's a real privilege sometimes.
So I suppose coming in, because I suppose sometimes you must be coming in for say 1 or 2 days. Is it quite nice to do a period piece, because the world, it's a totally different world. It's not just an office block or something.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, I do think of it as a privilege, because you're getting to visit these incredible locations, dressed in. It's almost like a bit of cosplay, or what they call it. I forgot what it's called. When you dress up as characters and reenactments. It's almost like a reenactment. It is a reenactment. Of course, it's a historical reenactment, but rather than done for personal pleasure, it's done for artistic purposes to get something on the television or on a film screen. Excuse me, get the message. It's just, you see these places in a way the public doesn't necessarily always get to. It's again, that's a privilege, and sometimes because I'm a glass wearer, a spectacle wearer. I'm not wearing them right now because I don't need them for things close up. I need them for distance vision, but obviously, if I'm filming something in the medieval period, I can't wear my glasses, so everything's a bit murky and a bit distant and vague, and I'm able to just imagine that if I can ignore the cameras and the bright artificial lights, I can just almost imagine I've stepped back in time and I'm in a completely different era, which is fun, good for the imagination.
And so with the historical costume, hair, makeup, props, does it make it a slightly more complicated shoot to work on?
Yeah, I suppose by necessity, of course it does, especially for the very talented people on the other side of the camera, hair and makeup, costume, props, locations like yourself. I think to get the audience to buy that what they're looking at wasn't filmed 6 months ago, but somehow was captured 600 years ago, I think it's a skill. Obviously, it's a range of skills across all those different departments, and they've all got to work together. They've all got to be in sync, and I think it's a real challenge for productions, but somehow they all manage to rise to it, and I'm always impressed by the end results, as I imagine the audiences at home are too. For our part as supporting artists, we've got to just, again, I mentioned that I wear glasses. Obviously, you've got to remember not to have your glasses on during a take. It's basic things like that. Modern accoutrements, modern jewelry, watches, things like that. Not looking too tanned. Actually, I probably wouldn't be very good on a production at the moment. I've done nothing but be out in the sun recently. But yeah, our part of it is not easy, but we don't have the complexities that costume and props have to worry about, and I really do admire that side of it, and the skill and attention to detail that those guys put into productions that really manages to make the audience really invest in it, and suspension of disbelief, I believe, in these things is hugely important, and I'm always amazed when they manage to make that come off.
So is Doctor Who a particularly exciting and complicated show to work on? Because even something like the flashback sequence, you had Atmos, you had all sorts going on in that.
Yeah, it was. As you say, there was Atmos. There were smoke machines running and making everything look like it was a recent battlefield. Again, just things like making sure there's nothing modern. Can't have any modern vehicles in shot. Antennas, satellite dishes, things like that. Not that you'd have something like that on a mountainside, but even down to litter on the floor, you wouldn't want to see like modern crisp packets on the ground of a Singapore battlefield from the 1940s. The set dressing and the attention to detail again is just phenomenal. And you do walking on set, especially in costume, you do feel like you step back in time, and it's a lot of fun. Like I can't call it work; it's too much fun.
So your second encounter with Doctor Who was with Jodie's first episode of the latest series at Swansea. It was supposed to be dressed as part of MI5. Was that a little bit less exciting as a sort of modern day setting?
It was very exciting because Stephen Fry was there, which was exciting. I didn't see him, but I know Lenny Henry was around for that episode. The TARDIS was there. I hadn't seen the TARDIS in the previous episode I'd done. It was, when I realised that they'd made Swansea into MI5, because oftentimes when you don't get to see the scripts as an extra, so you're given an idea of what the scene is by the ADs usually, but oftentimes you're not 100% sure what's supposed to be what. So knowing we were there in MI5 and that Stephen Fry was this big powerful character, and somehow they impounded the TARDIS. It was all very exciting. As I understand it, now I only watched the episode once. I didn't have my finger on the pause button like I often do when I'm on screen. But I got to be honest, I didn't see myself in that episode. I know where I was standing. I was a security guard at the entrance to the building with a few friends of mine who were playing police officers. But I remember the camera shooting past me, and I think you'd have to be pretty fast on the pause button to catch me, I'm afraid. But I was there. I got to enjoy it and experience it, and it's always a pleasure working on a program like Doctor Who.
So is it often that you have to watch the program when it comes out to perhaps understand how your scene fitted in?
Yeah, a lot of time you don't realise where your scene fits into the overriding narrative, or even knowing what the overarching narrative is. I did a Bollywood film last year called India versus England, and I did 3 days on it. It was a bit more than an extras role. I had dialogue, I had interactions with the principals. I was a character with a name. It was an actual starring sort of role. But I'd only done 3 days on it, and my scene seemed fairly inconsequential. But when I watched the film afterwards, my character was actually pivotal to the entire plot, and what I thought was some generally banal bit of dialogue that I had to deliver was actually a huge plot twist in the film. So that was a surprise, and I had no idea about that until I watched the final product. It was like, oh, I'm important to this scene. And when you see extra roles, sometimes you realize that it's the background people that really bring scenes like that to life. Nothing against the principals, who are obviously doing a fantastic job, but we help flesh out that world and make it seem more plausible. And if you just had the same two faces in shot all the time, the audience wouldn't be able to buy into it. You need background. And it's funny, as when you do it as often and for as long as I have, you find yourself watching television programs and films now. I'm looking at the background much more than I'm looking at the principals. Ryan Gosling could be there, Brad Pitt. I'm looking at, what's that? Did those guys get paid, or they just happened to be passing when they were shooting? All these guys in the background are being paid with a few exceptions. So it's always fun to see what they're doing, and often times to see if there's anyone I know, depending on the production.
And as I said, you worked across both television and film. From your point of view, how different are the two? Is it just that it's a bigger scale on the film?
It varies on the film. Yes, absolutely. You're right. Like I said, Mission Impossible, that was huge. That was the one that was filmed in St. Paul's Cathedral. So, was one of those really surreal moments. Yeah, it wasn't a set; it was the real St. Paul's Cathedral, and I was there, literally stood next to Tom Cruise, thinking, "I'm getting paid for this. It's not so bad." But yeah, the food's often better on film. I think the money behind certainly sort of your big budget Hollywood type productions. There's a lot of money behind those, and the food's generally very good. Nothing against the BBC or smaller productions, but they don't quite have the same budget. Yeah, the special effects budget, the security is tighter on film sets as well. Fair play, they didn't take our phones off us on Mission Impossible, but they did insist upon these little security stickers that go over the cameras front and back, so everyone had to hand in their phones and make sure their cameras were covered. Otherwise we could use them as normal. But yeah, that goes without saying that when you're working on a project, however major or minor, is spoilers and story details are a no. You've got to keep all that sort of stuff to yourself.
And something like Mission Impossible, how much do you have to do with the actual, principal actors, people like Tom Cruise? Do you get much chance to talk to them?
I didn't, sadly. He did address me and about 400 other extras by at the end of the scene, thanking us for our professionalism and for a very pleasant day. But like I say, he was addressing me and dozens of others, not me, just me directly. So it's rare. It's not that you never get to talk to the principals. It's just rare. I mean, they've got a job to do. They've got dialogue to remember. They're staying in character. They're trying to concentrate on getting the scene right. So, of course, it makes sense that they don't want to be bothered by a bunch of extras asking for selfies and autographs and a chat. But sometimes they're chatty and then they're happy to talk nonsense with you, which is always nice. But yeah, it's rare. It's not like I've forgotten his name. Ricky Gervais, Extras. Great series, and very well observed. You can tell that he'd done the job for real. But every episode, he's having these big, long conversations with the principals, and that's the one thing that's not very realistic about it. Again, it happens, but it's rare. I think probably twice a year, maybe, if you're lucky.
Of course, before working on Doctor Who, you'd worked on Class, which had a very, I suppose, fairly young and new group of actors as the principals. How was that production to work with? Did it feel like Doctor Who?
I didn't know too much about the Coal Hill Academy. I'd heard about it, but I'm not a huge Whovian. Some of my friends are, and they filled me on some of the details before I did that. And as you say, it was before working on Doctor Who proper. So that was my first, what do we call it? The Who-niverse. That's my first introduction to the Who-niverse. That's what I'm calling it. It was just, yeah, the cast were very young, but they were all very professional. They were all very good at their jobs. They all got the scene done. I was the janitor in that one, which apparently Capaldi had played the janitor in the previous episode to me. So I like to think there's some kind of weird link there where I'm kind of a bit I don't know, connected to the Doctor in some way, but that's me overthinking things. No, it was only the one day on that one, but I enjoyed it. It was good. It was a shame, I think, that production didn't last more than the one season. But that's the way things go sometimes. You never know. Yeah, I enjoyed that one. It was good.
And I suppose it must be actually quite a good thing that you don't go into it as a big fan. It's just another day's worth of work, because I imagine some people would get very excited about being on set for anything, not just Doctor Who.
Yeah, there are certain. I am a fan of other productions, and I'm not going to name them now because I'll end up shooting myself in the foot and I'll never get to work on them again. But like I say, for me, it didn't. The only thing that mattered for working on Who for me, sad to say, is it's the bragging rights, because so many of my friends are massively into it, and I did really enjoy it. Like I say, it was nice to go back for a second episode because I had enjoyed the first time round so much. So, but yeah, you're probably right. It's probably best. People can fan out sometimes, and I've never got to work on a Star Wars, sadly. Lots of my friends have. Some of those are big fans, so that's a dream come true for them. I'm going to be honest, I would like to do one of those one day. We'll see. But yeah, I think however much you're invested in a franchise, you do people do this regularly, like I do, and lots of other people in the industry do. I think we do bring a professionalism that even if we're going to wig out and be massively impressed by the sets and the actors, we can keep it together and we can get the job done.
Being based in the Southwest, I suppose it's inevitable that you will come across Sherlock and Poldark. How were those series to work on?
Poldark I did twice. That was really good. I was a footman in, I think, series 3, and then a politician in series 4. That was a lot of fun. That was at the Bottle Yard Studios in Bristol. I think the first time I did it, I was quite new to the game, and I didn't really know anyone. But by the second time I'd done it, I knew almost every other extra on set. There were some good friends. It was really good to see again. I did speak to Aidan Turner briefly on that one. He's a nice guy. I was very impressed how I had seen Poldark briefly, and I'd forgotten he's Irish because Poldark's not Irish, obviously. But his ability to lose the accent for a take and then just talk normally in his Irish brogue between takes was just incredible. I'm terrible at accents, so I really admire that skill. But yeah, he's a very, very talented man. And Sherlock, again, yeah, sadly, I did spend the day next to Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, but there was no interaction. But the scenes they had were very dialogue heavy that day. They were deeply focused on getting the scenes right, which of course is absolutely the right thing to do. But it was just fun again to be so near such acting luminaries. Toby Jones was there as well on my episode. I was a journalist for that one, or photographer specifically. But yeah, I managed to see the premiere of that episode as well. They showed it at Chapter Arts Centre in Cardiff a few hours before it was broadcast later that evening. So we got to have a Q&A, and it was just nice to see myself up on the big screen. Normally it's the small screen, but sometimes I get on the big screen too. And I remember the day, my favourite memory of working on Sherlock was because I was a photographer. I'd come in like combat trousers and a sort of a utilitarian outfit. So I looked a bit like a runner or a member of the crew. And as I arrived to the breakfast table, the first person I saw was Mark Gatiss. So I just instinctively went, "Morning, Mark." And he just looked at me and thought, "Oh, he must be crew or something." He was like, "Morning, how are you?" Like he was greeting me like he knew who I was, even though he had absolutely no idea. But he was very approachable. He was very, very nice about it. And yeah, just made me laugh. And later on, I got to speak to him and ask him a few questions at the Q&A when that episode was shown at Chapter. So that was good. He's a great guy, Mark. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to work on, and I'm a huge fan of Conan Doyle and the Sherlock Holmes stories. So yeah, even though they're modern day adaptations of those, very different from Doyle's style, it was that was a good one. Really good.
So was Sherlock perhaps one of the most sort of exciting jobs for you then, with that interest in the actual program itself?
Yeah, I think. Probably, but I think all jobs are good. I mean, some people look down their nose at like soaps and productions that are on a more frequent schedule than something like Sherlock, which is a bit more prestige. But I just enjoy working, and it's all down to the people, like the crew, the cast, the essays. Everyone on set's generally so good. It's very, very rare that you encounter big egos and people with chips on their shoulders. Generally, I think everyone's just trying to get a quality production done, so we're all focused on the same thing. And yeah, each production's good. There are a couple of exceptions I'm probably not going to name in case I make enemies, but 99% of the stuff I've worked on has been an absolute pleasure. There's only the occasional time where you sometimes have a bit of a moment where you think, what am I doing with my life? What am I lying on a cold floor in a disused army base at -7 at 6 a.m. in the morning, dressed in pajamas, looking at the ceiling, thinking, I've got to get a proper job. That was that one existential moment. I won't name the production, but I did have a moment where I almost called it a day. But you remember, these are the exceptions. Generally, it's a lot of fun, and a privilege. As I've used that word many times. It's a lot of fun to work on, and I love it as a job.
Am I right in thinking that there are sort of certain productions that often supporting artists cut their teeth on things like the Welsh soap and Casualty, that because they go through so many supporting artists that
Yeah.
you sort of guarantee quite a lot of work, particularly when you start out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've done a lot of Casualty. It's probably, with the exception of Spanish Princess, as a production I've worked on the most. It was one of the first things I did. Yeah, and as you say, they go through such, you need so many background patients. They do have the regulars, the hospital staff. Eagle-eyed viewers will see the same faces week on week. Those guys have almost got that as a normal job. But I think what I like is the diversity and doing something different every week. Although post-COVID, I'm quite happily accept a bit of something regular. But yeah, you're right. There's not many. When you talk to people that have started doing it for 6 months or more, it's very rare that people haven't done Casualty or, as you said, Poldark before very long. Although I'd been doing it for about 4 years before I got Poldark, but I think I wasn't with the right mix of agents at the time. Whereas now I've diversified a bit more, and I'm with some more. And I do northern stuff as well. I say northern, Birmingham's not really north, is it? But you know what I mean. It's north from me. But I do like doctors in Birmingham, and I haven't done much further than that. I did recently finish a film in Blackpool, but I'm thinking of doing Peaky Blinders and Emmerdale and things like that further north. So yeah, I've got a little checklist of things I'd like to say I've worked on. So I need to start working through that. Fingers crossed, if that's possible in the new scheme of things.
And we've talked at many screenings and Q&A events. You also have a love and interest in the industry. Did that start when you worked in it, or was that already there?
I've always had it. Yeah, since I was a kid, I was big fanboy of certain franchises. We already mentioned Star Wars. I really like a well-constructed world. Something you can really imagine isn't fantasy but reality. Like a film like Blade Runner, where that the set design and the props and the interaction between the principals and the world really just for 2 hours makes you forget that you're watching something slightly fantastical and unrealistic if you think about it. But for 2 hours you can just lose yourself and imagine that you're part of that world. So yeah, I've always been a huge fan of cinema when it's done right, television too. And I like to think there's more of it that's good than bad. There's some stuff that's very difficult to immerse yourself in and lose your sense of suspension of disbelief. But again, because I'd gone down another route at school and in sixth form and at university, I was going down a different path. And then later on, sort of regretted that and thought, I wish I'd focused on film and television and drama. And so later in life, I had that regret and assumed that the door was firmly shut to me. But as an extra, as a supporting artist, there is a way in. And again, occasionally I've lucked out and managed to get a small part in production. So yeah, it's I do believe I'm privileged to work in the industry because I'm a huge admirer of these productions when they're done right. So to be even a tiny cog in those big machines is an honor, and I love it.
So with that love and interest in the industry and the way it all works, are you perhaps interested in doing more acting work, or perhaps even moving behind the camera?
I don't think I'm interested in moving behind the camera. I have I've dreamed of directing and screenwriting. I'm not very focused though, if I'm honest. I think I start like with writing. I do write, but I'm very good at starting projects, and I'm good with ideas, but I'm not very good at seeing them through to completion and then doing something with them. So never say never, but right now I'm happy being in front of the camera. But certainly acting. I've taken acting lessons. There's a place in Cardiff called Actors Workshop where I've done lots of courses and masterclasses, and I believe I have a degree of skill. In fact, I did a web series not long after I'd started acting lessons and won a small award at an American festival for my part in that, which was nice, and a little pat on the back, because it's a confidence thing sometimes, especially when you're stood up in front of dozens of very, very talented cast and crew that have seen it all before. To impress people like that is daunting, but if you can dig deep and find the confidence, is very rewarding when you do it. So yeah, I think more proper acting roles would be good, but that's not to say that I'm turning my nose up at the background stuff, supporting artist stuff, because I think that's essential for productions, and also I really enjoy it, and it does take its own sort of skill. I make it out like it's easy and you just have to turn up and stand in front of a camera. It's not like that at all. There are ways of handling yourself and carrying yourself and conducting yourself that are very important, and lots of people don't get it right and don't get asked back. So there is a skill there.
Well, I think on the note of things to come, and I think people will realise that being a supporting artist perhaps isn't as straightforward as you think. I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time, Lex. It's been great to touch upon some of the things you've done. I know there's an awful lot more.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the tip of the iceberg is all we've chatted about so far. There's so much more to it, and the hardest part, I think, is organising your life around this crazy world, because I have to be all over the country at various times of the morning to make this a success. And with coronavirus, it's completely dried up. I'm hopeful that those things are going to start gearing up back up soon. And just on a slightly Doctor Who related note, I'm a big fan of time travelers in telephone boxes. So I thought I'd show you my T-shirt there. Not quite the Doctor, but yeah, there you go. Not exclusive time travelers in telephone boxes, not just British.
Oh, fantastic! Well, hopefully when all this is over, you're busy on all sorts of productions again. I look forward to crossing paths.
Look forward to seeing you on future sets and at future Q&As with the BAFTA and all of that. So yeah, always a pleasure to see your smiling face.
Well, thank you for talking to me, Lex. Always lovely to catch up with you.
A pleasure.